Okay, sorry. Once again, good evening, everyone. My name is Theodore Barrett. I'm one of the OBGYNs here at University Hospital. I want to thank Doreen for a nice presentation, and I just want to thank Dr. Sanchez for having me here. He sent me several emails, all of which I deleted, because the title was Black Excellence, and I said, I don't really consider myself excellent at anything. But one night I'm on call, I'm in the ER, and he corners me and says, "Did you get any of those emails I sent you?" And I said yes. And well, if you don't consider yourself excellent at anything, maybe you can just talk about your expertise. Or well, I don't know if I have any expertise in anything. And I thought for a second. I said, well, I am an expert at being me. So he said, well, there you go. Talk about your journey. That'll be fine. So I said, okay. So I only have one slide. I guess I'm not going to see it today. But I just want to mention my journey or my adventure begins really 31 or so years ago, where I sat in a room like this. Matter of fact, it was that room right across the hall there at B610. And since that time, as I mentioned to some middle school students on Monday, I've earned 3 degrees. I gained 30 pounds. I had my heart broken a few times in this campus, and I became a teacher, a researcher, a physician, and a surgeon. I used to live on 3rd Street, which is a few blocks in that direction. My mother taught school for 43 years at Morton Street School, which I can see from the back of Labor and Delivery every night that I'm on call. Just hold on a second. My father taught at Kansas Middle School, a few blocks in that direction. I came to Newark every summer for Vacation Bible School because my parents didn't have child care. I hated Vacation Bible School. So the church was the AME church in that direction over there. Does anyone know who Leroy Jones is? Yes. The name he took on later on is, who is the father of the current mayor. He was a school teacher at Camden Middle School in that direction before he became mayor, and my aunt worked with him and was friendly with him. Sharp James, who was a mayor later on, was also friendly with my aunt, and when he passed away, he made a very nice speech at her wake and came there. So I've been in and around Newark, New Jersey for a long time. We move out of Newark when I'm young. We go to a suburb, exit 135 on the Parkway. And like many of you here, and like Dean Johnson, I find myself as the only black in that section of the town. Life is very, very different there. And all the usual vulgarities that come with being only black, I endured like everyone else. I remember my father telling me, as a universal theme, like many of your mothers and fathers probably told you, do a good job of whatever it is that you attempt to do. Even if it means you are a garbage man, you need to do a good job at that. My mother at the breakfast table says, he's never becoming a garbage man. I don't care what you say to him. And I laughed at my father and went away. I really didn't listen to him all that carefully. Anyway, while in this suburb, I felt alone. I felt like no one else was going through the experiences I was going through. I've been stopped so many times by the police, it became a routine. Twice I was stopped walking out of my own house. Today we call that racial profiling, but didn't have a word for it back then. I was a relatively immature kid. I go off to a New England college where I'm lost there. Most of the time trying to find my place in America. I graduated from college, didn't go to medical school. I feel like a complete failure. I got a job at a Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company, and while I was there, I heard a speech from Martin Luther King. It's the first time he gives this at a grammar school, and he talks about a street sweeper. At this pharmaceutical company, I had a terrible job. I had a job nobody else wanted. I worked in a fermentation plant. And the fermentation is the process by which they make beer, but in those days they also made a lot of antibiotics, and particularly this company made gentamicin, and I worked with the people on the patent of gentamicin. My job was to prepare and then clean out those fermentation tanks. And I know you must have been caught behind a garbage truck at one time in your life. That smell behind that garbage truck was the smell I smelled every day in work. And so I felt I was at the bottom of the heap, cleaning out these fermentation tanks and doing et cetera. And as I mentioned, I remembered that speech by Martin Luther King. In the middle, there's 54 seconds, he talks about this street sweeper. So while at this pharmaceutical company, in taking care of these fermentation machines, I wrote a troubleshooting manual because they were always breaking down. My boss, I presented to my boss, who then puts his name on it and then gives it back to the company who manufactures the machines. And a couple of years later, I see their troubleshooting manual, which has my diagrams and my writing in it. So when you work for these pharmaceutical companies, you sign over your rights for everything. So I had nothing to complain about, although I was honored that they plagiarized my stuff. So I read everything I could about microbiology because I was in a microbiology plant. I took courses at Rutgers in New Brunswick in microbiology. And after this, the director of our group gave me one culture to work on. So I was now doing the same work that the PhDs were doing. They were handling 15 cultures that produced some sort of antimicrobial agent. I was working with one and taking care of the fermenters. There was a woman that had been there for 40 years, and she was the one that helped direct on what components go into this fermentation media. And there were thousands of components that go into a fermentation media. And so she was very helpful with me. She was very gracious with her time. But I knew there had to be a faster way to rapidly screen through these thousands of media components to find the ones that this organism likes to produce this antibiotic. Pharmaceutical companies have loads of statisticians, and so I went over to there and I became familiar with one and explained how microorganisms use protein sources, nitrogen sources, carbohydrate sources, et cetera, and asked them, could you help me, or is there a technique that we can use to try to screen through a lot of these components to get the right ones quickly? So in the end, after a lot of thinking, we borrowed a technique from agriculture where the same things that farmers use to adjust soil components to optimize the growing conditions for crops. So we used that technique to identify what might be good candidates for a fermentation medium. And then what I learned on later was called regression analysis. We did it on graph paper back then, that's how old I am. It's called least square methods. We then developed a mathematical model to explain how this organism was performing with these ingredients. They made up a whole lot of fermentation medium, then tested the model, and then optimized the conditions for this bacteria to grow in to make this antibiotic. So I realized that we can skip years of work if we do this. And no one was helping me do this, but I had lots of time on my hand after I cleaned up these smelly garbage trucks. So I made all the medium myself. Eventually, I went back to my boss and said, I can optimize any organism you give to me now. And so to test that, they gave me the production strain of gentamicin. In 3 weeks, I had exceeded the production formula for gentamicin, which took years to develop. So that year, I get, toothache. That year, I get an evaluation of excellent. And there were 800 employees at this site. 6 people got excellent, and I was one. All the others were PhDs. So I was riding high. I was feeling great. I have to leave the pharmaceutical company. I completed all the coursework for a PhD, and I figured if I have to leave the company, I might as well apply to medical school, which I did. By then, I was a very good candidate. The medical schools welcomed me with open arms. I do good in medical school. I miss AOA by one grade. But the one grade that I missed while in medical school, I specifically went to areas that nobody else wanted to go to. One of the hospitals was Bronx, Lebanon. I don't know if any of you guys have been to Bronx, Lebanon. It's a place a lot of people don't want to go, patients and residents alike. So that's the place I went. Because I carried with me from the pharmaceutical company there's opportunity in places where no one wants to go. And sure enough, that was the case. I did well there. Graduated from medical school, applied to residency. I wind up here in what was called UMDMJ, going to OBGYN. My senior year, I'm resident of the year. Hired here. I didn't have a full salary. The chair didn't have a full salary, but he finds one for me eventually. And I work here. 2 years later, I become medical director of our clinic, and 2 years after that, I become a board examiner. So I was doing well. I still don't really consider myself an expert in anything, but I was working very, very hard. Nobody wanted the job of medical director either. We had hired a consultant who felt that they can combine 4 clinical areas in this campus into one in the DOC of Suite 5100. It was a terrible mistake. And we could not find 30% of our charts. Finish up, I will. We cannot find, anyway, we rolled out the first electronic medical record at University Hospital. I realize now that we can call now population-based medicine. I can see the entire population of people that come to the university, that are female, come, and I can manage them all at once. So we did a lot of things, we'll cut it short, in that environment that involved us using the electronic medical record. I became a big fan of that, and I was there for a number of years. I know you want me to wrap it up. I'm just going to say to you that I'm going to take 54 more seconds of your time. I'm going to do something that Dr. Sanchez tells me not to do, and I'm going to play that 54 seconds of that speech that impacted me back then. I hope you feel the same way.
Even if it falls your lot to be a street sweeper. Going out in sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep streets like Handel and Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Sweep streets so well that all the host of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, here lived a great street sweeper who swept his job well. If you can't be a pine on the top of a hill, be a scrub in the valley, but be the best little scrub on the side of the reel. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be the sun, be a star. It isn't by size that you win or you fail. Be the best of whatever you are.
And with that, I became a street sweeper.